And just like that, we are live on this Friday night. Coming to you guys an hour early because we got a big historic fight coming up in a little bit. Amanda Serrano versus Daniela Ramos that we will preview. Shortly, we'll get into some other things first, but I got a special guest, Dakota, on with me. Nibs could be joining us in a little bit, but how are we feeling, Dakota? How does it feel to be on the show that you helped name too? So, we're on episode 11 now. You're on a
Bro,
few
always
episodes.
got to remind them, dude. Always got to remind them who fucking named the show, dude. Yeah, good to be back. Thanks for having me on. Always fun seeing you guys and shit. Slow couple of weeks we got here, but this episode's for the diehards for sure.
The diehards, and also we'll mix in a little freak show stuff with the MMA, boxing, whatever you guys want to call it too. We won't spend too much time on that. A little bit. We got to hit the quota on that just a little bit, but great time to be alive right now. We got NBA, we got NFL, we got all these things kind of coming up, but it was not a great time to be alive, unfortunately, for Alexis Rocha last weekend. He came in the big favorite against Giovanni Santillian, and man, Santillian just had the performance of a lifetime. He just seemed like from the opening bell, he was one step ahead, and just Rocha wasn't really ready for it. So what were your thoughts on, because we've seen Santillian and Rocha both be up and down, but what were your thoughts on just the Santillian that we saw last night, who I thought really proved himself to be a legit contender at 147 now?
I think the biggest thing for me was it just looked like they came in with two different sets of intentions. Like Rocha had a lot of show going on. There was a big posse. There was flashy clothes. There was a lot of music. And then you see Santillian and Robert Garcia walking in gray like tracksuits, looking like they're going to work. And right from the opening bell, it just felt like Santillian had a level of intensity and physicality that he was trying to assert on Rocha that Rocha just wasn't prepared to deal with. And as opposed to trying to start boxing, Rocha decided to fight him on the inside, and it was just very clear who the stronger, more durable, better engine fighter was, and it was just Santillian for the entirety of the fight.
Yeah, but one thing they always say with boxing is it's easier to kind of start boxing and then get into a firefight. But whenever you start in a firefight like that, you're never really able to get back to boxing. And one thing, just there's been talks about that those two have had sparring in the past. So it seemed like just, I don't know if Santillian and Robert Garcia, obviously that's been a great addition to his team. You almost wonder if they took something from those sparring sessions and noticed things, and almost not that the book was out on Alexis Rocha, but they kind of realized certain things that they could do, because it seemed like they had that confidence the whole fight week. As you said, they kind of kept their head down. Didn't say too much, but they always seemed like they had that real confidence about them. Do you think any of that had to do potentially with the sparring that they had before? Because it did seem like they knew the recipe and how to beat Rocha, back him up, and do those things right from the opening bell.
Well, I mean, shit, bro. They looked pretty confident that they knew what was going to make him uncomfortable. So you have to think that has something to do with it. Like, and I can't remember prior ever seeing somebody really take it to Rocha, even when he lost to Rashidi Ellis. Rashidi just boxed like a really smart fight. So it's a tactic that we haven't seen anyone use against Alexis Rocha. And I don't know if we knew if Santillian had that, that level in him. But the truth is, Santillian's always been a really good fighter. He's fought some good, like, kind of gatekeeper type opponents that are very high level. He hasn't had dominant performances over those guys, but it's clear that he's learning on the job. And there was just, I think it's just a difference in hunger between the two guys. Like, it just looked like Rocha kind of felt like he's arrived already, and Santillian looked like he felt like he had something to prove.
One thing that you notice too, you can always tell when a promotional company has faith in their guy. We're top rank. It was kind of not a questionable move, but a lot of people were wondering why they sent Gio just free over to Golden Boy to make that fight. And clearly you can see now why, because he picked up a big win. But I'm going to play matchmaker for 1 second. So, because there are a few fights that I would definitely want to see Gio win going forward. Let me think. Any of days you have good or bad fights, but one fight that I really would want to see, it's a fight that he's mentioned. I know the other team wouldn't be opposed to it. I think a fight with Mario Barrios right now would be a good fight. I think both guys have picked up big wins, and I think that would make for, even whether it's for the interim title Barrios has, or either way, I think that would be a good title fight for him. And even if he has to kind of wait a little bit for a title shot, I would love to see. Imagine Gio in fights with like Mean Machine Kavaliauskas or Butayev or any of those guys, even a Cody Crowley in the mix who's looking for a mandatory spot. But Even Avanesian, I think, would be a cool fight. So what do you think about those fights, or just where Gio fits in welterweight? Because there's a lot of, I know the big guys are probably moving up to 54 and Boots is there, but I think there's a lot of fights that I would really, really want to see Gio win, which I wasn't as hyped to see him in before, but now I definitely want to see him in some of those fights.
Well, I think the first one that's worth bringing up of note, and maybe you know the answer to this, but there is a sanctioning body that have him and Josh Taylor as the number one and number two guys. If anybody wants to comment which sanctioning body that is, I should have had that offhand. But
it's a WBO. I know that. It's a WBO, I think, because Taylor was WBO champ.
So they have those two guys, number one and number two. I mean, for just the significance of fighting for a belt and fighting a guy that's that big a name, I think that's probably the most logical move for him, both being top rank. It's probably easy to make. And having that belt gives you a certain amount of leverage, even though belts aren't everything anymore, right? If you're a world champion, you have something that other guys are going to want. The Barrios fight is great. Did I hear that Cody Crowley retired or something?
I saw that, and then I saw he unretired. So I don't know too many details behind it. I saw he retired for a bit. He was probably upset, but I mean, just boxing's a dirty game, so clearly I'm sure he was upset about. At one point, it was him waiting for a shot, and then I don't know if it was actually the Santillian fight. He was trying to get into a fight, he wasn't able to get in, so I'm not sure. That might have just been a heat of the moment kind of thing, but it seems like he's kind of backed off that. But because if he has backed off that, he's clearly a player that we'd want to see him in some of these fights. But the Taylor one, I think, would be the most obvious one. And even another guy to look out for with the WBO champ at 140 status is Teofimo could also move up. So I wonder if you could see with Santillian there now, Teofimo could be in play to even move up and try to grab a strap at 147. But I do think Taylor and Teofimo are probably the two most likely options for him. And I'm cool with either one of those two.
I'll tell you, just on an entertainment level, a fight that I would love to see is Santillian against Roy Monvilla. I think that would just be an absolute banger of a fight. To some extent, it kind of feels like maybe Santillian has earned a fight bigger than that, but just as a fan, I think that'd be a fun matchup. I think the last one kind of worth bringing up, and I have no idea what the practicality of this with all the shifting things in PBC, but if Errol Spence wanted to prove that he was still a formidable guy at welterweight, a win over Santillian at this point would be significant.
Yeah, clearly. What I think for Spence, they're looking to go up to 54. I think his days at 47 are in the rearview mirror. But like I said, if he is going to stay at 47, I think that would be the perfect kind of guy to go against. So I'll be interested in any of those fights. I think the Taylor ones and the Teofimo ones are probably the most likely. But at this point, I think it's just good because anytime people see a built-up record like that, you always wonder, well, how good is Santillian? Are they kind of moving him slow for a reason? But I think it's good to see because he's now shown that – because I've had question marks before about him. I wasn't sure exactly. I knew he was really good. I didn't know where he fit in as if he was a legit contender or not. Yeah, and I think he showed – and I think this was just the perfect outing where he showed that he is a legit guy at 147 right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's definitely one of the guys.
We got Brendan Smith saying right here, talking about Fury and Ngannou. I think he's saying he doesn't even care about a lot of the comments about it. He's excited for tomorrow, and he doesn't care if Fury will win against Usyk. I agree with that. I mean, I think that I would love to see Usyk win that fight, honestly, just from a fan's perspective. But I think Fury's too big, too strong. But
it's almost beside the point. It's mandatory that it happen because there's an opportunity to have an undisputed heavyweight champion. Point blank period. There's no other heavyweight fight that has any meaning for me at the moment.
No, 100%. And that's why
not any meaning, but that's athletically the most significant.
Yeah, not of an equal meaning to that per se. I mean, there's other fights that would have some meaning, but not the same as that. We'll get into the Fury and Ngannou thing. We'll briefly touch on that and not spend too much time. But I guess the good thing I will say quickly on that is that I'm still not thrilled about the fight tomorrow, but I can put up with it more knowing that the Usyk fight is coming next. And that it's not instead of the Usyk fight, which is what I think we had thought before, knowing that, okay, this is kind of just like a sparring session before the Usyk fight. I guess I'm more okay with it. But what are your thoughts? You kind of have that same sentiment towards that?
I think it's whack.
Yeah. I still think it's whack without a doubt for sure.
Yeah,
I can't lie
think
about
it's
that,
whack, bro. Like, I can't hate on anybody for making their money and and it's what to me what's whack is that there's still a market for it. Like, people haven't figured that out already.
Yeah, and I think when you see which we'll touch on this real quick before we'll get into that before I say too much. But last other main event from last week, Jack Catterall beat Jorge Linares by decision. Catterall is someone who I see he kind of that fight kind of had sparring session vibes to me, where he never really got out of first gear, but he also didn't have to get out of first gear.
Nope.
Scorecards, I think, were like 8-4, 9-3. I thought it was much closer to a shutout than that. I mean, the right guy won anyway, so not that it matters, but I thought he clearly won most of the rounds in the fight. And I just think Catterall is the guy that if you're a casual fan, I could see why you would say he's a boring fighter, or you might want to watch other guys. But I think for us, we can see the skill set, we can see the wheels turning, and we can see why he's just a hard guy to beat in the ring too once you match him up with the top guys. So what were your thoughts just on Catterall's fight? And also Jorge Linares announced his retirement. I know that you have been a big fan of Linares since it's come up. So what are your thoughts on Jack's win, and also Jorge calling it a career after some big wins and multi championships?
So let's start with Jack Catterall, because I think, but first of all, I think I scored the fight 9-3 as well. I felt like the scorecards were sensible. I also wouldn't have really had a problem with like 10-2 or 11-1, but there were some close rounds where it felt like Linares was landing some of the snappier punches. It felt like at times Catterall made the fight a little harder for himself than he needed to, just because he kind of gave Linares the only chance he had, right? Like he made it a tactical fight and not a physical fight. And there's very few Linares fights where he's lost tactical fights, right? He's lost physical fights. So I thought that Catterall kind of chose the wrong battle, but that's just how he fights. And so I think Linares was able to give him a decent amount of resistance. Linares is not like a sad old guy, right? He's just not quite what he was. He sort of lost a step in every category. I think Linares 5-6 years ago would have been more assertive offensively, and would have pulled the trigger a little more. But I still think Catterall would have given him problems at any time in his career. He's just a sharpshooter, bro. Like, he's a sharpshooter. He hasn't gotten the right fights, the right opportunities. He was fighting a guy that was coming off of 3 losses in a row, which is never the best look when you're trying to prove that you're the guy. As great as Linares is, right?
Especially moving up in weight too. All those losses were at 35, so he's coming up in weight also to add to that too.
And look, losing to good fighters, but just fights that he probably would have won at a different time in his career. It's just that's the way it goes, right? This is not the fight that we want to see Jack Catterall, and we want to see him in with, the top of the division, even if that's guys like, Elvis Rodriguez or Sandor Martin or Subriel Matias or, whoever it is, Gary Antoine Russell. There's so many talented guys at this weight. And I think that Catterall's deserved a shot at literally any of them. I mean, the giving Josh Taylor essentially his first loss, not on paper, it hasn't served him. And I think it's about time that it does.
Yeah, and that's a fight that they've mentioned is the rematch between those two. Is that a fight that you'd care to see again? I mean, we already saw it the first time. I think it would be cool to see, because I do think Jack would get a rightful win in this fight. But I think I'd rather see him up against the other guys, just the other top guys at 140 right now. Especially because the Taylor fight would be at a catch weight maybe too. I think for me, it would be cool to get that win. I'd rather have him stay and fight some of those guys that you mentioned.
I'd rather see if Taylor's got one more chapter at welterweight, and I'd rather see Catterall fight the best at this weight class, whether it's Tio, whether it's Hitchens, Barboza, Ramirez, fucking you name it. There's so many good guys at this weight class, you know what I mean? And I think he's just another guy on that list, and I think he's got a viable chance against any of them just because he doesn't really get hit. It's hit and don't get hit, guys. Like, whatever the means to that end is, it's hit and don't get hit, and he's really good at hit and don't get hit.
Yeah, and a few of the fights that they've mentioned, because he is with Matchroom right now, I know that Liam Paro is going to fight Montana Love on the undercard of Haney and Program. I mean, not that I'd love to see him fight the winner of that fight, but I mean, that's a cool fight. I think that's another step in the right direction, a step up from Linares. And then the other fight that I would want to see is that this would be definitely a hardcore kind of fight, but him and Richardson Hitchens would be a great fight, I think, too. They have a lot of similar tendencies, and it could be a stalemate at times, but I think for us, that's the kind of chess match that we would love to see, and I think that would be a fantastic. I'd wish that there would be a belt on the line, because that's a championship level kind of fight right there.
I mean, those are tactically two of the very best guys in the division, honestly. And I know Subriel Matias has a fight coming off against Shojahan Ergashev.
That's a great fight too.
Undercard, seeing Catterall in with the winner of that fight. A lot of this hinges, though, on what exactly PBC is going to do moving forward.
Yeah, exactly. Me and Nibs touched on that last week, where we still don't really have too much of an idea. We know Amazon's interested, but they're looking more for the pay-per-view, the big fights, because everybody will want the Canelo fights, the Tank Davis fights, the Spence Crawford rematch. But we're more interested, as you said, to see where they land on a network deal. What kind of budget do they get, and where do these, like a Subriel Matias, where does his next fight kind of land, and things like that? Because there are more of those guys than there are the big pay-per-view draws.
That's a fact.
Yep. So we'll now move into it. Did you want to touch a little more on just Linares announcing his retirement at all, or just 'cause I know
Sure.
you want
I think real quick, I think he's a guy that early in his career had freakish speed and athleticism, and I think there was a lot of expectations around him just being a super dominant champion. And then there was bumps along the way, and he picked up some losses, some knockout losses, and there was a period where I think people sort of questioned, like, is his durability ever going to match the talent? And I think in those fights, he proved to be so vulnerable in that way that in some ways he underachieved, and then in some ways he overachieved, where the guy that was getting knocked out by guys not on his level wound up becoming a 3-division world champion and having, like almost a 20-year career. So Linares was always entertaining. He was always down to fight the fights. He fought the best of his era, and I've always really enjoyed watching him.
Yeah, and even someone like me who got into it, so I got to see more Linares on the tail end. But you did always know if you're watching his fights, they were going to be, for the most part, entertaining fights. He's always going to put it on the line. He's going to do whatever he can to win. And he's, like you said, the hand speed, the power, the combinations, those are things that I think are very appealing to the eyes. And we talked about in the pre-show just about, is he an underachiever or an overachiever? But I think just being a 3-division world champion, just the fact that I think people were even considering that potentially being an underachievement shows how highly people also think of him, because not many dudes out there. If you're saying a guy who's a 3-division world champion potentially underachieved, that I think might even speak better towards him, because it speaks of how highly he was looked at coming up, and just the fact that, I mean, he was never the pound for pound #1 fighter in the world, but he was in great fights, multi-division champion. So I think all said and done,
kind of like Zab, right? It was kind of like Zab Judah, where Zab would sometimes lose to guys that he had no business losing to, but the natural gifts were always there. I think Linares, even in some ways, like surpassed Zab in the sense that he did win at the top level multiple times, and if anything, he kind of won not on the B side, but just as in 50-50 fights because of his history of getting stopped. You know what I'm saying? And especially like in the DeMarco fight, he's winning almost every second of the fight, and his face just falls apart and he gets stopped. It's tough to come back from that, but then to have another 10 years of a career after that with a lot of success, that says a lot.
That's a fact. And you likened it to Nolito Donaire, and I think you could see some of the similarities where they were both counted out once upon a time and then had a lot. I mean, he had the wins over Crolla, the wins over Luke Campbell, and even in his losses, as he's got into his 30s against the Lomachenko's and the Devin Haney's, he still had his fair share of moments in those fights and always showed that he's the kind of guy that you got to be careful for from round 1 to round 12, because that power is going to carry, and you're always kind of on the edge of your seat just waiting to see what's going to happen with him. For better or for worse, you never kind of knew what was going to happen in his fights, without a doubt.
Yeah, you didn't know if you were going to get the guy who won both Crolla fights and the Luke Campbell fight, or the guy who got stopped in the first round by Pablo Cano. It was so tough to know, but that was part of the thrill of watching him.
Yeah, and I think for me, I was just happy to see him at least go the distance in this fight, the Catterall fight, where he had moments here and there, but it was good to see him go the 12 rounds. And then I think it's good to see him call it a career now instead of, because he still has enough of a name where he could have got a few more fights, but with the durability questions, you never know how that's going to go for a guy who's now moving up in his 4th weight class.
To get a couple more fights too. That's the thing is, I know he lost his last 4 fights, but he still had a little something in the tank where he could have being that journeyman guy if he really wanted to do that. And I'm glad he didn't. By the way, just as a final thing, if you were going to list the top 20 fastest hands of our lifetime, you'd have to put him on that list.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. So I was just saying, if anybody isn't as familiar with Jorge Linares, go back, watch his old fights, go back, watch his highlights. You'll definitely be excited. You'll see, I guess, why we're speaking so highly on him right now. Just a hell of a career, and it's good to see him. I think he's starting to now kind of get the flowers he deserves, where, as you said, during his career at times, people kind of either really high on him or really low on him. But I think put in a career. Whenever a guy announces a retirement, I think people kind of see their career in hindsight now. It's like, you know what? Like, I might have said this or that about him, but he had a pretty damn good career at the end of the day.
Well, because it all accumulates.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? If you were commentating his fight right after he got knocked out twice in a row, yeah, I don't know what but
Mm-hmm.
he didn't give up on himself.
Yeah, that's a fact. So we will now move over to the head title of this video, which is Tyson Fury against Francis Ngannou. I promise we will not spend too much time on it. Not a fight that either of us are going to be waking up, jumping for joy tomorrow, but it is something we do have to cover. One thing I will say, just to start off with, is just that, I mean, I know it's a $79.99 pay-per-view, and I'm not telling anyone to go out there, but in a hypothetical sense, because these are all hypotheticals, of course, we can't speak in any absolutes for this, but in a hypothetical sense, that you could hypothetically find other ways to watch the fight that might be more up my alley for this kind of fight. Everyone make their own decision, but I'm just trying to just say in a hypothetical sense, that might be more the way to go for this fight. But I see a lot of people trying to compare and say, oh, how much of an upset would this mean? Some people are saying, oh, would it be as big of an upset as in the MMA world, like a GSP when he lost to Matt Serra, or would it be as much of an upset as Mike Tyson losing to Buster Douglas? To me, I mean, it's not even in the same conversation. I know they actually have odds for this fight. I think Fury's like a 20-1 favorite. I mean, bro, shouldn't he be like a 200-1 favorite? I just think that there's no chance Francis Ngannou wins. And I want to say right now, if anybody's thinking about, because I've seen people say, oh, the power, what if he lands one shot? If you're thinking about betting on this Francis Ngannou fight, I have a better alternative for you. You can go to your local gas station, corner store, whatever, and you can just go buy a lottery ticket. Because there's honestly a way better chance of you hitting the lottery, winning the Powerball, one of those things. So if you're thinking about betting money on Ngannou, please don't do that. Please just go to the lottery.
You can go to the gas station, get some gasoline, and pour it all over a bunch of cash and light that shit on fire, because it's a similar kind of deal. Watch on the 1.1% chance Ngannou wins, we're the highlight reel of like.
We will be, but yeah, I'm cool. Yeah, I'm cool being on the side of that, just because there's no way. I mean, I'll put it this way: Mike Tyson is in the corner of Francis Ngannou for this fight. Who would you give? Honestly, if they were to fight tomorrow, do you think there's a possibility we could make Mike Tyson the favorite against Francis Ngannou? Never mind Ngannou fighting Tyson Fury. I think that's more like a real conversation to have. And I'm not trying to exaggerate. I'm being completely honest about these kind of things. So what do you think about that?
I think that's a more realistic fight, like you said, truly. And I think the fact that Mike is pushing 60 and that's a more appealing fight than Ngannou fighting Tyson Fury. Listen, we're talking about the biggest, strongest, one of the most athletic heavyweights of all time. And we want to see him in with the 10 different heavyweights that are contenders and can make interesting fights, and he's not taking those fights. And so as kind of hardcore fans and enthusiasts and people that want to move the sport forward, this is not a fight that moves the sport forward. Also, I wanted to bring this up to you because maybe you know the answer. Have you noticed that none of this card is on BoxRec?
I did see that earlier, but I did see that they added the I'm going to look it up right now, but the Fury and Ngannou fight was added to BoxRec today. So it is a sanctioned fight by the British Board of Control.
Maybe that's changed in the last couple of hours.
No, it literally just in the last couple of hours when I got out of work, I saw it. I see it right here. So the whole card is actually on here now. So I'm confused. So the British Board of Control is the commission for it, but the fight's in Saudi Arabia. How does that work? I don't really know. But the fight is, you'll be able to see it if you're pulling it up now. But you do see, so it is Fury and Ngannou. You have Fabio Wardley, David Adelaide, Joseph Parker, Simon Keane, Carlos Takam, Martin Bacoli, Arsenbek Makhmudov Jr., right? So you do have all of those fights on there. I don't know if are you seeing it right now, or because they did add it.
Yeah, I do see it now. It's funny. I literally probably checked at 4:00 and it wasn't up.
Yeah, it literally was just in the past time. I think a few hours I saw her tweeted about it, something like that. But we'll just move over to the undercard at this point because it's a foregone. Actually, real quick, how do you see this fight between Fury and Ngannou going? Do you see, before I would have thought that Fury kind of messes around, he kind of carries him, just plays to the crowd and toys around a bit. But with the Usyk fight coming up in December or January, do you think he can even afford to do that? Not on the risk of losing the fight, but on the risk of hurting his hand or getting cut, getting an elbow, getting a bruise. Do you think any of those things kind of come into play with the kind of effort that he puts in tomorrow against Ngannou?
Well, I mean, he's capable of both, right? Like he's capable of walking him down and beating him up, or he's capable of doing what he did in the Klitschko fight and just kind of being on his toes and throwing his jab and being
Mhm.
longer and smarter. I think he's going to do whichever he pleases.
Whatever he wants to do.
And
Yeah.
he'll do whichever he wants to do very easily. And I don't think that barring, a serious headbutt or a foul or frankly a freak punch, this is not going to do anything to endanger that fight. It sucks that we have to wait for the meaningful fight for this goofy shit that's not even for boxing fans. But it is what it is.
Yeah, I guess the one thing that I worry about, just the worst thing possible, would be, let's say Fury knocks out Ngannou, but then in the process breaks his hand. Like, just there's so many. That's why it's tough to. Because don't get me wrong, he will win this fight. He won't. If he doesn't want to get touched, he won't really get touched. But there's still some of those unforeseen things that we don't think is going to happen. But he could just throw a right hand on and Ngannou, knock him out and break his hand or anything like that. So we just hope that those things don't happen, so we can bypass this fight to get to the real undisputed fight, which we've been waiting for, and seems like we might finally get. So no more roadblocks. I don't want to see anything else get in the way of this because we're almost there. So let's just get to it.
That's a fact, bro.
This undercard, is there any of these fights intriguing you on the undercard? I know for me, Fabio Wardley, David Adelaide is a pretty cool fight. I think Wardley's a slight favorite, but that's just a toss-up. Anytime you see undefeated heavyweight prospects, I think it's pretty cool. And another fight that I want to mention, it's two veteran guys, or one guy's more long in the tooth than the other, but I do like the fight between Martin Bakole and Carlos Takam also. I think Bakole is just good to see him. He had the win over Tony Yoka. I think he had another big win before that too, but it's good to see him finally.
Takam.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Yeah, funny. They both beat Tony Yoka. That's right. So I guess that is a cool thing to do. I know that Takam lost to Joe Joyce and then Arslanbek Makhmudov, but he beat Jerry Forrest before that. So I think that's a cool little fight. I think it's good to see them both rewarded with also fighting each other instead of a lot of times we see in boxing, it's, oh, you're the veteran who upsets the young prospect, so we're just going to put you in with an even better prospect. So it's good to kind of see them face each other in what should be kind of just a cool, good old-fashioned heavyweight fight.
It's a really good heavyweight contender fight. Takam's been a guy for over a decade. Just a solid contender. If you're not the real deal, he'll beat you. I think Bakole might be a top-level heavyweight, but we're going to find out from this one. There's not too many. There's some good fighters on here, but there's not too many like interesting matchups for me. I'm looking forward to seeing where Joe Parker is in his career. Shit, bro, tough to get excited about this card.
Yeah,
real.
No, it isn't even Simon Keane, who Parker is fighting, somebody who I think Joe Parker's not a huge knockout puncher, but I'll be surprised if he doesn't get him out of there. And then the one thing I want to say is I'm kind of aggravated with the way that Arslanbek Makhmudov, who's a guy from Russia, he lives in Canada now. He's 34 years old. I think he's got a pretty good amateur pedigree behind him, 17-0, 16 knockouts. But it's weird kind of the way they're moving him. I mean, he actually, for example, he beat Carlos Takam. It was in a competitive fight, knocked him down twice last year. But since then, he's almost kind of gone backwards. He's now fighting Junior Wright, who, no shame to him, I mean, any of us would dream to be the level of contender or heavyweight that Junior Wright is, but he's just not. He's 20-4-1. He's been stopped 3 times against guys who aren't even on potentially even an Arslanbek Makhmudov's level. And someone who, I think Makhmudov is someone who has a clear ceiling to me. I don't see him as ever being a world champion or anything like that, but maybe that leads into some of the matchmaking that they're doing. But do you have the same kind of feeling as me? Do you want to see him in? Because I think he's someone who would be the perfect opponent for a guy like Jared Anderson. He's a bigger, stronger. We always talk about wanting to see Jared fighting bigger guys. So maybe that's next, but I don't know. I'm just not just kind of second your thoughts. I'm just not a fan of the matchmaking for him in this fight. I just want to see him in with somebody.
I'm not a fan of the matchmaking at heavyweight as a whole right now. I mean, there's a solid crop of heavyweight contenders, and there's way too many guys that are undefeated that are not fighting each other, and I'm not sure what exactly the promoters and whoever think that they're building towards, but I think the only way to get the public excited about these guys is to match them with each other. And between guys like Makhmudov and Jared Anderson and Frank Sanchez, and there's all these really talented guys.
Yeah. Throw Jalalov in there too, someone who I'm pretty high on also.
And none of them have come anywhere near each other.
No.
So I don't know how they think as fans we're supposed to get engaged with them as fighters.
And that's why I will give credit to Frank Warren and Eddie Hearn, because they did come together and make the Fabio Wardley, David Adelaide fight. Not that they're two top 10 heavyweights or anything like that, but those are the kind of matchups we want to see. Two undefeated guys who both promoters think highly of, so throw them in there. We've always talked about these losses. We'll get into Oshaki Foster in a bit, another example of losses not meaning too much. But let's say Fabio Wardley or Adelaide lose that fight. It's not like it's the kind of fight that I like to say propels the winner and the loser stays in the same spot. It's not like the loser then goes down, depending on how you lose, as long as you don't get blown out. So I think that we want to also reward these guys. And if even like a Daniel Dubois, he lost to Joe Joyce. Okay, so he goes back, picks up a few wins, and then he has a solid fight, and he gets a title fight against Usyk. So I think that that's the kind of path some of these guys can look at. And I will give credit where credit is due, even if I'm not as high on Wardley and Adelaide. I think at that point it's even more important to get them in the ring with each other so we can have one contender at least out of them too.
Just for the record too, isn't Makhmudov the one that knocked out Richard Torres?
No, that is Jalalov who did that. So Jalalov's the Uzbek guy, the southpaw. He's someone who I really, really want to see against Jared, against Torres, and all those guys. So he's the 6'7" Uzbek guy who just signed a top rank. So I'll be interested to see. Talk about heavyweight matchmaking. He's been the same thing. I mean, bro, he fought the world famous Curtis Harper just last year too. So it just shows the kind of level that the level that they're matching him against, but he should be.
The only heavyweight taking any meaningful fights really is F.A. Ajagba, bro. I mean, and Derek Chisora. Like, those are the only guys that I feel like actually will fight anybody. Maybe Big Bang Zhang is kind of the same way too, but it's tough, bro.
Yeah, it is, especially because not that the heavyweight division is loaded, but the talent is there to make these fights. So I think, but you just have to 100%. Make those fights, and without making those fights, that's why we kind of used to get stale for us as fans. But I do think that the Adelaide Wardley fight is cool. Hopefully we get Makhmudov in with somebody closer to his level. And I think the Takam Bakoli fight is pretty cool too. So maybe is it Arslan Makhmudov and Joe Parker next? I think that's a fight that I'd be semi-interested in also. But we're going to move on now to tonight we have a historic fight. We have, I think it's the third ever, but it's the first in over a decade. I think it's been almost 15 years since we've seen it. But Amanda Serrano will be fighting 12 3-minute rounds tonight against Daniela Ramos. What are your thoughts on just Serrano fighting these 12 3-minute rounds? I know it's not the first time it's happened, but it's the first time in over 15 years, and I'm interested to see kind of if this becomes a trend or if this is just kind of a one-off. But what are your thoughts? Because I'm excited to see it, and I think Serrano's style, fits really well for these 12 3-minute rounds also.
I think she's the right one to do it. I think it's unfortunate. I mean, we were talking about the undercard before, right? It's like me and you are about as diehard as it gets, and we don't really know anyone on the undercard. So I think it's unfortunate that it's happening on an event that's not of any significance. But all that being said, I think it's good for women's boxing. I think there's been so many really high-level title fights. The first couple that come to mind are Clarissa and Savannah, Michaela and Alicia, really high-level
Serrano, Taylor.
Exactly, Katie and Amanda, that always feel cut short, right? Because they're essentially the length of a 6-round men's fight. So you're getting about half the fight on a title fight. And I just think that women's boxing at the highest level has evolved beyond that. And I think that this is the right time for this.
Nope, I agree 100%. I think that is the perfect time for it. What effects do you think this will have on women's boxing in the long term? Do you think this will kind of, because we saw it happen, I think it was 10, 15 years ago, but it didn't gain any traction or any steam. Do you think women's boxing is further developed to a point now where this could become the norm and we could see more 12-by-3 kind of title fights? Or do you think this could just be a one-off and we might not see it as much?
I think it'll happen more often. I think that what it'll take to really make it more common is that there'll have to be a meaningful matchup that takes those rules up. It's going to have to be, a Taylor Serrano rematch. It's going to have to be Shadejah Green and Savannah Marshall. It's going to have to be a really meaningful, high-level fight that I think opens up the fans to like, hey, yeah, when we get to this elite level, I do want to see a full 12-round fight.
I think it would just change the whole, just the strategy for some fighters. And as you said, it changes from 10 2-minute rounds to a 20-minute fight. We would now have 12 3-minute rounds, a 36-minute fight. So 16 extra minutes of fighting is, as you said, essentially a whole second fight. And I think that one of the criticisms a lot of people give women's boxing is that they don't have a lot of knockouts, which is true. But I also think in the 10-by-2 format, you have some fantastic action fights also. But even for some people would say, oh, well, you wouldn't see as many more knockouts in the 12 3-minute rounds. I'll just say that I think you would, because even in men's boxing, a TKO is way more common even in men's boxing than it is just a guy getting. You don't really see many people just get leaned and knocked out cold. Right. A lot of TKOs, corner stoppages, ref stoppages, cuts, and all those things. And I think that somebody like Clarissa Shields, for example, she's the greatest female boxer of all time. Not a huge one-punch boxer, but if you had put her in these 36-minute fights, I think she could get a lot more TKOs just based on accumulation and wearing some of these fighters down. I think Amanda, a lot of these fighters the same kind of way. So you would agree with that? I just think that it would help out. You wouldn't see as many females getting leaned down, just being knocked out cold. But I mean, you might even see more. Not that even, I know some people want to see, not that we even want to see that per se, but you would see more fatigue. So maybe you would see more of that. But I think you would actually see an increase of stoppages more on the TKO route, just like you do the men's side.
It's also going to give you a better sense of who the top fighter in the division is. I mean, the longer the fight, the greater the truth, right? I mean, an amateur fight is 3 2-minute rounds. And so somebody who's going to be the best in the 3 2-minute round is not going to be the best in 12 3-minute rounds. It's two different things. So I think it's just acknowledging that, yeah, women's boxing is evolving. The elite level fighters are elite level boxing talent, and it's about time they get that 3-minute.
Yeah, we got a question right here asking when is the fight Fury and Ngannou. So that will be tomorrow afternoon. I think the card starts 2 p.m. Eastern time, 11 p.m. Pacific time. So adjust your time zones accordingly. And then the main event is scheduled for about 6 p.m. Eastern time and about 3 p.m. Pacific time. So hopefully that answers your question. So that is approximately when that should be. Got a comment here too saying MMA is pointless because they knock out a lot of people with their hands. Might as well do boxing and make big millions that way. I'm going to agree and disagree with that comment. I do see what you're saying with they might as well go into boxing. I just think a lot of them, the talent-wise, Francis Ngannou, for example, his whole life he wanted to be a boxer. He was just, I think, too limited in his striking growing up, so he realized that MMA is an easier avenue for him, and he became the heavyweight champion of the world in the UFC. But I also do think I wouldn't say MMA is pointless, though, because there are a lot of specialists who don't do much. On the stand, you have the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu specialists. You have the Dagestani, the Russian, the wrestlers, too. So I think you have a lot of different styles. So if you're an MMA fighter who focuses more on striking, I guess the crossover could be beneficial to you because just the pay is such a big difference. But I think there are a lot of other fighters in MMA who clearly we've seen anybody who transfers over won't have the same success in boxing that they do MMA. But I think there are a lot of fighters who just wouldn't even have, like the Ben Askren when we saw him fight Jake Paul. Ben Askren is a wrestler, always been a wrestler, never even buckled somebody
with hip replacements.
Yeah, yeah. But even just there are a lot of fighters who have never even buckled. They've never hurt somebody. They've never even knocked somebody out with their hands. So I think that there's only a slight, even for any of these MMA fighters, none of them have a chance in the boxing ring for sure. But there's only a slight chance of them that could even Ngannou. We all know he doesn't have a chance, but enough people, as you said, can say, oh, well, what if he hits him with this? They've at least seen him knock people out, but I'm just not sure. There's not enough of those MMA fighters, I think.
At some point, and I'm going to briefly give our friend Adari a little bit of an education, but I think there's some confusion. If somebody is a great triathlon athlete, that doesn't mean they can do the Tour de France, and it doesn't mean that they can race Usain Bolt. It means that they do a completely different thing that requires a certain skill set. The MMA fans' expectation, once again, that this is going to be a competitive fight, it comes from a certain amount of delusion that goes back to the early days of UFC that said, this is better than boxing. 2 guys go into an alley and 1 guy comes out. It's always the MMA guy. And that, even if you think that that's true, you put somebody who's a world-class boxer in a boxing ring with somebody who has no boxing experience. The guy with no experience has no chance. There's expertise in this world, guys. Like people are experts in stuff, Some people are experts in boxing. Some people are experts in jiu-jitsu. Some people are experts in fixing sinks. Some people are experts in putting out fires. But there's experts in this world, guys.
Yeah, but your point is that Francis Ngannou is not an expert in the sweet science, and we will find that out tomorrow.
Yes.
Even, for example, a name we threw out there, never mind adding any heavyweight on this undercard, but a guy like Richard Torres, he's only, I think, 7-0 maybe as a pro. I would feel very comfortable putting almost any amount of money that he would even be able to beat Francis Ngannou for sure. It just shows the gap and just the level difference between a lot of these fighters. And just like that, we have my co-host is here, Nibs. What is going on? Thank you for joining us. I know you're feeling a bit under the weather, but we do appreciate you coming on to chop it up with us, my guy.
Man, our namesake is here, and I got to show up, bro.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Well, you made it time right for us to talk about the only meaningful fight that's going to happen tomorrow, which is Sean Foster.
Real quick before we go to that, Dakota, we'll talk, and even Nibs. Well, I'll give you a chance to speak on this too, because we just talked about Amanda Serrano fighting Daniela Ramos. It's going to be the 12 3-minute round, something we've talked about a lot. So, what is your interest level for her fighting the 12 3-minute rounds tonight? Do you think that leads to her getting a knockout tonight, more knockouts in the sport? And do you think this is something that we'll see more momentum? We saw it 15 years ago where there were 2 different fights, 12 3-minute rounds, but there wasn't as much. It didn't gain traction after the fact. Do you think that women's boxing is in a new spot now where this is something that we could be more likely going forward also?
You talking to me or Dakota?
You. That's something we just spoke on, so I wanted to get your. Yeah, we covered it, but I know it's something we spoke on in the past, so I kind of wanted to get your. I figured you have some thoughts on that.
Definitely. The way I look at that is you look at where the sport itself has gone, right? You look at women's boxing as a whole, it has grown, sorry, still a little, it's grown expeditiously over the last 5 years, right? Most people didn't know who Amanda Serrano was 3 years ago, right? Hell, if you take the top 10 female boxers, most people didn't know who they were, right? Now these are household names. Right, people know who Clarissa Shields is. They know who the Katie Taylors are. They know who the Amanda Serranos are, and they're giving us some of the best fights, not just in women's boxing, but in boxing. Period. Right? We're still talking about Taylor Serrano. You feel me? Like that's still one of the best fights I've ever seen. Period, bro.
Well, in women's boxing, at a time where we're having a hard time getting good matchups, they give us the fights we want more quickly.
Right. And because of the state of women's boxing, right, they need to fight each other quickly, right? To your point, Dakota, they can't wait for fights to marinate, like they're doing in men's boxing, which we all loathe, right? And then we finally get the fight and we're like, well, thank fucking God, I mean, look how long every fight that we really, really wanted really badly took years. There's so many fights, we could go on and on and on in men's boxing. We just didn't get, or we got them so late we didn't give a shit anymore. You're not getting that in women's boxing. These women don't give a fuck about their O's. They don't give a fuck about looking, who looks the best. They get in there and they whooping each other's ass to boot. You know what I mean? You don't get any Canelo versus Charlo moments either, right? And I'm not trying to throw any shade, but a little bit. You don't get anybody that shows up and doesn't show out. So, even if they know they're going to lose, Heather Hardy, right, against Serrano recently, she had no chance, but she never gave up, even though she was getting her ass thoroughly beat. Up until that last bell, you knew she was going out there trying to win that fight. You don't get that in men's boxing as much. We're getting it in female boxing. It's more exciting. And I've said all that to say, if you're going to give me more of something that's even more entertaining, right? And these women on all the elite fighters in not just divisions, but in the sport itself are fighting each other, sign me the fuck up, bro.
Yeah.
And I think casual fans, before I get, for casual fans, yes, I do think the knockouts will increase, which will increase viewership, right? And it'll change how people look at. Some people still think it's the WNBA, right? Some people still look at it that way. I think the more knockouts you get, because I do think there are some girls who would have more knockouts if they were 3-minute rounds. I think Serrano would have more knockouts, and she's got a shit ton of them if there were 3-minute rounds as opposed to 2. So, hell, I think Clarissa might have some more knockouts if there were 3-minute rounds as opposed to 2, right?
And to be fair, personally, I don't think there'll be as many as there are in men's boxing, but the 3-minute rounds will mean that there are more knockouts in women's boxing than there are now. I think that's undeniable.
Yeah. And one of the things that I said, I like that you brought it up because Nibs, that was actually my point with Clarissa Shields, is that even in men's boxing, it is way more likely. If a lot of the knockouts we talk about, oh, this guy has 37 knockouts. Most of the time, 25 of those are TKOs. Most of the times it's the ref steps in or the corner steps in or somebody waves it off. Or you're not seeing many people just get leaned out and put to sleep. So I do think that will help women's boxing. And I said someone like Clarissa Shields, a high volume puncher, if you get into 12 3-minute rounds is 36 minutes. 10 2-minute rounds is 20 minutes. Me and Dakota were saying, you're basically giving them a whole second half of a fight. You're basically doubling almost the time of the fight. And that will lead to, I think, just more punishment. I think you will see just the fatigue will set in more. Some of the females who like to kind of front run these fights and kind of just get off early and then kind of coast a bit, you won't be able to do that. So I do think that it will be better for the sport. It would be all action. I think that there's some great fights still. I think the 10 2-minute rounds format will still stay for some fights, but I think, as you guys said, for the big special fights, I'm all for having 12 3-minute rounds.
Title fights.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
I think that helps separate the division, right? So I think it helps weed out some of those girls that are kind of hanging around as top level fighters that probably really aren't. You feel me? And it'll help those longer rounds kind of help weed that out, and you start to really see who's really elite
and who has elite conditioning. That's the other thing is the conditioning aspect of it.
That's a fact. So Dakota, someone you've been very close with, you have another project coming out with her is Shadeja Green. First of all, I'm sure she's very happy about you spoken just how she's happy about the 12 3-minute rounds. And is there any chance you think that we could see an announcement for her? There's rumors it could be Franchon Cruz because Savannah Marshall is now the champion in recess. So MVP has a card tonight. Obviously, Serrano is on the card. Jake Paul is announcing his next fight. To me, it would only make sense that Shadeja has, not that it would be her, but they announce her next fight also, and I'm hoping. Because it's a big platform. It's a big night for women's boxing. I think that would be the best thing for them to do, without a doubt.
Well, starting off, shameless plug, episode 2 of The Fight Life with Shadeja Green is going to be coming out within the next couple of days. So stay on the lookout for all the ITR fans. It's going to be a great episode. You're really going to enjoy it. I could tell she wanted to tell me what the date was going to be, and she couldn't. So I'm going to just go ahead and assume that, yes, that is going to be the event that she's going to be on the undercard of, and she's going to fight Franchon. I personally think she's going to dominate the fight. I personally think she's the best women's boxer in the world. But I'm really hoping we get that announcement tonight because, I met Shadeja back in February when she was on the Amanda Serrano undercard, and she was already the mandatory. So she's been sitting there for, I believe it's now 13 or 14 months as a mandatory to a championship. You wish the system of boxing could work for these fighters a little bit quicker to get them the kind of fights they deserve.
Yeah, that's a fact.
Fellas, I got a question for you. And it's kind of been one that's been rattling around my brain a little bit. And I make no qualms about being a Serrano fan. I think for pound for pound, I think she's the best fighter in women's boxing, literally, because she's got 7 weight classes under her belt. If you look at the landscape of where we are now in women's boxing, would you attribute that more to what Serrano has become or what Clarissa Shields is?
I mean, to be totally honest, I think they all have a part in it, right? There's been this generation of female fighters that's really taken it to the next level. I think it would be also hard to ignore Katie Taylor's significance just in being like maybe the most famous Irish boxer ever, and really sort of solidifying her place in history for that. All three of them, I think all three of them. Clarissa is definitely a big part of it. Amanda's a big part of it because of the knockouts she gets. I think when it's all said and done, somebody like Sanisa Estrada will have contributed to that as well. Amanda's right up there though, man, with, she's really moved the ball down the court on women's boxing.
Yeah. To me, I think they all get an equal amount. And someone else who I'll give credit to is, we don't give him too much credit, so I will give a little credit, but is Jake Paul at the end of the day. I mean,
absolutely.
We keep it real and everything about Jake Paul, but I got to give him credit for this. He was part of, and even Amanda Serrano, she deserves all the credit for what she's done, but it's not like she just became this really good fighter. She was just as good. She might have even been better because she's a bit older. She might have been even a better fighter when she was fighting for $5,000 for titles, 12 years ago. And she is now, just because of just the brand and her paving the way, paying her dues, all those things. But I give Jake Paul a ton of credit also for pushing, because Serrano a bunch of years ago wouldn't have had the leverage behind her to even ask for these 12 3-minute rounds, and just the platform that she has. And that's why Shadeja teaming up with them, I think, is a great thing, because I think it should do great things for her also. But I think I want to give him, we keep it real, we kind of shit on him sometimes too, but I do want to give him credit because he's just as, maybe not as valuable because the fighters go out there and fight, but as far as like him and another guy who I don't give a lot of credit to sometimes is Eddie Hearn. Give them both credit at the end of the day, because I think that as far as promoters, I think they're the two who are pushing the most for these women's fights, and they've been involved in the biggest women's events that we do have.
Amen, brother.
And that's what I mean, right? Like when you look at the platform that Serrano now has, and because of who she is, right, within the sport, it makes it easy for her to be kind of like the champion for, bringing out, women's boxing and elevating it, right? You can't take away what Clarissa Shields is. I mean, she's a 2-time Olympian. She's going to go down in history. She's going to get all the accolades she deserves, right?
And they gave us their version of Crawford Spence in a couple of months as opposed to 7 years. Her and Savannah made that look quick,
right? And it didn't disappoint.
No.
and she rarely does. For all the people who say she doesn't have knockouts and she's a boring fight. Look, watch one of her fights and tell me she's boring. I did.
She throws those hands. Mm-hmm.
Right. You look at what they both bring to the table, and you say the Katie Taylors and all that, right? I say it, for me, it's Serrano by this much because of the Jake Paul platform, because of people are watching her fights, bro. Like, people are tuning in. And to your point, also, Shanisha, with ESPN being behind her a little bit, I think maybe it is. Maybe I'm giving them too much credit. Maybe it is the platforms that they have, right? And they're exciting fighters. People want to see them.
Well, and Nibs, I think they don't get the platforms if they don't have the exciting performances, right? So I think that kind of comes with it. And Amanda has always delivered that excitement. I think the first fighter for me in women's boxing that really got my attention was Ann Wolfe. And the reason that Ann Wolfe got my attention was back in the early 2000s, late 90s, there was some decent women's fighters, but it was a sloppier sort of more of a rough and tumble, less established sport where the fights just had a certain kind of look to them. And then there was Ann Wolfe and Layla Ali. But Ann Wolfe was given viral moments before there was viral moments. So you gotta salute that woman for, really kind of changing up how people viewed women's boxing, because she was laying motherfuckers out.
Bro, she could probably still come back and lay some bitches out while you playing. You know what I mean?
That was real from the ground up power that woman had, man. Straight up.
Yeah, she's probably got. I don't know if I'd say, yeah, she's probably got the best women's knockout of all. The
Vonda Ward one. My lord. Oh yeah.
I watched that one live, bro. I watched that one live.
Bro, that might be top 5, period. That might be top 5 male or female knockouts I've ever seen. I mean, it's, if you put that in a movie, you couldn't script it any better. Like that's how you want knockouts to go. And
that's a fact.
Yeah, I get it. I'll say this. The first time I watched women's boxing, I'm not gonna lie, was Layla Ali's fight against Christy Martin, and it was just because it was Layla Ali, bro. And then I started YouTubing a lot of stuff, and I found Ann Wolf, and I was like, where the fuck have I been? You know, I felt like, yo, I'm fucking up. Like, you know, this chick is great, and she just wasn't getting enough love. I thought, you know what I mean? I was like, she should be on a much higher platform. I think if
And
you
Layla
took,
stayed clear of her.
bro, on purpose,
Yeah.
I think if you put Layla Ali and Wolf with today's marketing and platforms and availability, oh my God,
It's a pay-per-view. It's
every time out.
Hey, Nibs, I think I smell some other future fantasy fights. I mean, throwing them in there with the Shadeja Greens, Clarissa Shields, Savannah Marshalls. I mean, could we just imagine those? Because, Dakota, I think we've spoken about in the chat, but we're going to start doing these Fantasy Fight Friday episodes. I think that we have some of the men's side ideas, but I mean, shoot, throw those two in. We got some good matchups. So that's one thing I thought of as we were doing that. So I think we could definitely throw them in the mix for sure. Have some entertaining ones, some good debates on that.
Absolutely.
So now we will move over to the real fight on Saturday. We already talked about kind of the fight. So Nibs, I don't know if you even want to. Do you want to give any even time, I guess, per se? Not that we spend too much on your thoughts on the Fury and Ngannou fight before we kind of go over to the real fight that we got coming up, or do you just want to go to the real fight? I'll leave it up to you.
Let's move on.
Y'all heard the man. He's doing us all a favor because we probably spoke too much on it. A few minutes too much we spent on it.
We gave it at least 4 whole minutes, Jack.
Mm-hmm.
I think we gave all the Monster Energy shirt wearers back to their buck tonight.
Yeah, the one thing.
That was 3.5 minutes too long, gentlemen.
Yeah, that's a fact. And I will say, Nibs, I'll tell you just the betting advice that I told anybody who, because I see people saying, oh, Ngannou, he's got the punch, this and that. What if he lands? There's an official lineup for the fight because it is a sanctioned fight now. Tell me if you think I'm wrong or if you think it's a good idea. Anybody who's considering betting on Francis Ngannou for this fight, I think I got a better alternative for them. I think you can just take that money you were going to bet on him, just go to your local gas station, supermarket, anything, and just buy a ticket to the lottery because he has a 100% better chance of you winning the lottery, winning the Powerball, winning any of those things than ever winning betting on Francis Ngannou.
Give it to your local food bank. Give it to somebody who needs it.
When you said gas station, I thought you were going to say go over to your local gas station and just light your money on fire.
Well, that was what Dakota said, and that's a fair one too. So,
you know what though, man? I mean, look, bro. All I'm going to say about that, and to your point, is this: people said Conor McGregor was going to knock out Floyd Mayweather because he's so much bigger and he's knocking people out in MMA. It reminds me of that, right? Because Ngannou is putting people to sleep in MMA. When you look at him, he looks like a guy who knocks people out. You know what I mean? For a living.
He's very talented at what he does. He's very talented.
We are talking about arguably, as much as we might go back and forth with Fury, we're talking about arguably the best heavyweight of our generation. Period. Fighting a guy in his first boxing match. Stop it. Just stop it. It was when people said Conor was going to knock out Floyd. It's like, are you serious? We're talking about the best guy to ever do it. Arguably, right? Or at least in our generation, against a novice. I don't give a shit how many people you were knocking out with those small ass gloves. Getting in a boxing ring is different, bro.
Yep.
And there's levels and there's levels and there's levels. If anything short of a complete dominance by Tyson Fury happens, I'll be surprised.
Yeah, and just not to go expand on this because we'll switch over quickly, but even with that fight, we all knew what was going to happen. But you could also say, oh, Floyd was retired, Floyd was in his 40s, and Conor McGregor, he was in his prime. He's a big, strong puncher. Well, Tyson Fury is the one who's closer to his prime. And they're about the same age. I think Ngannou's a little older, but Ngannou's the one who's had the knee operations. He's the one who hasn't fought in a while. So I think it even hurts their case even more. At least with that one, you could say, oh, Floyd's older, which, bro, at the end of the day, I wasn't even into boxing back then, and I knew how that fight was still going to go. But you could at least kind of play that game. You can't even do that here because he's fighting the active heavyweight champion when he's the inactive one, which just makes it even worse to me.
Bro, look, you could have Francis Ngannou John Jones, and Israel Adesanya, all three of them in the ring, and I think Fury whoops all of their ass at the same time.
3-on-1.
That's yeah. I mean, in boxing, bro, and I think John Jones is arguably the best MMA fighter to ever live.
He
And
is.
listen, this is where our fans are different than MMA fans. If you start doing kicks and wrestling and all that other shit, I think Ngannou wins. I think he wins very easily.
Yeah.
In fact,
He takes Fury down and just without a doubt.
easily.
It's
our world, and you don't win in this world.
It goes either way, right? It would be ridiculous of me to say Tyson Fury's going to go over to MMA and beat anybody.
You know what I mean? Dominate with jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, it's just not going to happen. Look, you could take Bud Crawford, who has a legitimate wrestling pedigree, right? If he were to start fighting, if he were to say, yeah, I'm going to go over and fight, I don't know, whoever is in his weight class in MMA, I'd be like, oh, shit, Bud about to get fucked up.
Yeah. That one might be interesting. He would probably still get, but at least he has, I've seen him wrestle other Olympians and hold his own. But we even saw Clarissa Shields, who is the greatest women's boxer of all time. She already lost an MMA fight, not because she wasn't as talented, just because the other girl, or woman, should say, just held her down. Didn't even do any damage, just knew how to just literally hold her down on the ground and win on time. So that's basically, it just speaks more to your point, just that we're not out here saying that any of our guys. I do think Bud could maybe be competitive with some of those guys, but that's the extreme who has a legit wrestling pedigree. And even then, he hasn't used it in a bunch of years either.
What was it James Toney, right? He went over and did the MMA thing. And I forget the name of the guy he was fighting.
Randy Couture. I remember watching that fight as a little kid. I remember that. I watched that fight.
He was huge in MMA at the time, right? I wasn't really into MMA at that time, so forgive me, MMA fans, for not knowing exactly who that guy was. But I knew who James Toney was, and I thought he was fucking nuts. And that was before I even knew anything about MMA, right? And I remember they did interviews, and the guy said, "Look, I'm not going to throw hands with James fucking lights out Toney." He said, "I'm going to take his ass down and I'm going to submit him.
I'm going to wrap his neck in my arm and I'm going to wait till he taps."
Right. And that's it. And he wasted zero time because he knew, look, if I give this dude any time on our feet, he's going to put me to sleep because he's James fucking Toney. It's just like, again, if Ngannou said, "Hey, Tyson, come over to MMA," he's not going to fight on that feet with Tyson fucking Fury. He's gonna get his ass on the ground and twist him up like a pretzel.
Yeah, like B Brown said too. Randy was basically done at that point. He was in his mid-40s, but all he had to do was, I still remember that fight. Yeah, and James was well past his best days too. Literally, all he did was the fight starts. He just goes to take down James, and James had no idea how to defend a takedown. I will say. And we do got the head of the table in the building. Look at that.
What's up, y'all?
What's going on? What's up?
Hey, y'all was having fun without me. I left real quick to go grab some food. I saw Nibs join the party, so I figured why not make it even more fun.
There we go. And I will say one thing I was going to say real quick is that, not that this is a common thing, but MMA, we do have a boxer who, it was Ray Mercer. He did go over and he did knock out Tim Sylvia, who was a former UFC heavyweight champion. Thing is, that was also so many years ago. I think that just that the UFC has developed so much more. So I think, yeah, that did happen back then, but we're also not saying, as we're saying, we're not saying Tyson Fury is going to go over there and beat Ngannou in an MMA match, or God forbid, even a John Jones. That would just be a cakewalk for him. So, Felix, real quick before we move on to the real fight, I've been saying it for a bit. We do have a real fight on tomorrow, O'Shaquie Foster, Rocky Hernandez, but what are your thoughts on just this whole and did you hear what our betting advice was for anyone who would bet on Francis Ngannou? Did you hear what we had to say about that at all? Or?
I missed the betting part. No.
Okay.
What happened? What was that?
So we've seen something. I'll let Dakota give his take on this too, because he had one also. But we've seen a lot of people saying like, "Oh, Ngannou, he can punch this and that. What if he lands one?" And I was just saying that you're better off if you have any money that you're going to look to bet on Ngannou. You got a better chance of just going to a convenience store, something like that, and just buying a lottery ticket. At least you have a slight chance of actually winning in that one. Dakota said you can just go to, because I said gas station first. He said, well, you could even just go and just light your money on fire. I think that's a fair thing. At least with mine, you got a slight chance, but just at the end of the day, that there's no chance. And just what do you?
Shock Foster his flowers, bro.
Yeah, exactly. too long. So here we go. Oshaki Foster, Rocky Hernandez. Real fight on Saturday. Fight that I'm really interested in. It's a really intriguing fight. It's a shame to me that this fight is flown as under the radar as it has because of the cloud show that we just spent too much time talking on. But this is a great fight. I think Oshaki Foster, the odds on this are really, really close. I think he's being undervalued, but he is fighting a pressure Mexican fighter in Mexico. He's a great story. Another guy who shows that you can come back from losses. So we'll go around. I'll start with Dakota first, and then we'll go around. But what are your thoughts just on this matchup, and who do you pick between Oshaki and Rocky to win this fight?
So I don't know that I've seen Hernandez other than him getting knocked out by Roger Gutierrez. So I couldn't give a real fair accounting of him. But personally, I think that Foster is one of the best, if not the best guy at 130 pounds right now. I think the fact that he beat Ray Vargas and the way that he beat Ray Vargas has very much earned him a quality fight. At this point, I'm interested in seeing him in with the guys like Emmanuel Navarrete and Joe Cordina and Rakimov, Oscar Valdez, whoever at 130 that is exciting and elite and available. Those are the fights I want to see him in. Lee Wood's going to move up to 130. I would love to see Shock Foster and Lee Wood. But it is another guy with a tremendous record. The guy's 34-1. And it's another win for Shock, I think, personally. Hopefully, he can keep moving in that direction towards a unification.
So Nibs, I know we talked about just we got into a real fight with Serrano, then we kind of got sidetracked a bit talking about that fake fight as just being real about it. What do you think about this real fight? We got Oshaki Foster, Rocky Hernandez. What's your thoughts on it?
I'm team Shock all the way, bro. I don't know if he stops him, but I think he dominates the fight. I think he's on another level. He's another one of those guys that I've been super high on that's got a couple of losses, right? And I think the losses made him a better fighter. I think he learned his lessons, right? And then said, okay, watch this. and every time people have underestimated him or thought he was going to do less than what he's done, he's basically told everybody to hold my fucking beer, and they're still holding that shit. And the dude is legit. Really, until you start really getting into like the elite level guys, I don't really think there's anybody that's gonna really fuck with him right now. To be honest with you, I think he's on his mode, and I'm here to watch that shit, bro. Yeah. No disrespect to Rocky Hernandez, but like the dude's earned his spot. You know what I'm saying? I think it's going to be a legit ass fight, to be honest with you. But I think even with that, like even having a legit ass fight, I think Oshaki's just going to be like a little bit. You know what I'm saying? The whole way. You know what I mean?
He was doing some really like really technical, smart shit against Ray Vargas. Just little things that were keeping him off balance and keeping him uncomfortable. It was like anytime, and what was so crazy was Ray's bigger, longer. He might even have like faster hands, but he couldn't get a jab on him. And then Shock would land his jab really clean. Like he just has a way of using his timing to make guys uncomfortable. And I think that really anybody at that weight is going to have a hard time dealing with that.
King Felix G, what you think? Nibs was saying, brought up a good point. Shock told people to hold his beer. They held it for so long, the beer is no longer good. What do you think about? Does he continue this hot streak? Are they going to still hold on to the beer, or do you think, or is he get a fresh one? What you think?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a good performance. And it's going to be a good fight. Rocky's a good fighter. That's the problem. I think is this fight is Shock isn't going to get as much credit as he potentially could be, because I think Rocky is going to continue to get better and show people how good of a fighter he is. And I think it's so early on, people aren't going to really give him his flowers for the performance he's about to give us too. I think it's going to be it's a great match, and it's a good fighter, really, really underrated fighter, I think, and he's going to pull ahead for sure. He's got the goods. He's got it.
Right. So I got just a few things, and I got two questions to ask you guys about this fight. So one thing you guys brought up, I think Shock is the most recent example of a fighter using their losses as lessons, kind of not being too down on themselves, just using them and becoming a better fighter because of it. We talked about earlier, me and Dakota, just with the matchmaking, and you put two undefeated guys in there, one guy might elevate their level, but it doesn't mean the other guy drops down. So I think Shock is the most recent example of that. But I think for Rocky Hernandez, path to victory, he's got to be active. He's got to throw his hands a lot, and he's got to be able to close that distance. If he kind of trades shot for shot at mid-range, I just think Shock is going to be too sharp. I think he's too defensively responsible, and I think he's too skilled. I think that for Shock, I think the key to this fight will be his jab. I think that Rocky, he's explosive, but he throws all hard shots. It's kind of like he's always one speed. He throws a lot of hooks. He doesn't set a lot of shots up. So I think that though it is the kind of style that you'd think can kind of rough the boxer up, I think it's also the style that the boxer can look really good against too, if he's able to kind of just keep Hernandez just one step behind him and not able to kind of just let him get going. But one thing Rocky can do is he can crack. He's got 30-something knockouts. So as good as even a Shock is up 6 rounds, 7 rounds, 8 rounds to even nothing, you're always going to be in the edge of your seat just wondering kind of what's coming next. Does Rocky land that one hook that kind of changes the course of the fight? I don't think he does. I do think Shock wins a clean decision. But two things. Are you guys worried at all about Shock just this fight? It was won a purse bid by Eddie Hearn. Rocky Hernandez is Hearn's guy. It is in Cancun. So clearly not going to be many people in Cancun rooting for a Shocky Foster to win. And then also, I think the ring size will be an interesting factor in this fight also. I'm not aware of what the ring size is. Sometimes in Mexico, you see those smaller rings. I think in a regular 20 by, I think Shock wins anyways, but if you're in an 18 by 18 ring, it does favor Rocky Hernandez more. It might make him easier for him to kind of cut the ring off, things like that. I do think Shock would win regardless, but Nibs, I'll start with you. Do you think that it being in Mexico for Rocky or the ring size could have any kind of, just would that make you hesitate on your pick at all, or are you still going Shock all the way?
It did initially. I'll be honest. When I first heard the particulars of it, I was like, oh, well, they setting this up, for Shock to lose. But we talk about this a lot, and maybe to the casual fans, they'll see finally what we're talking about. Boxing IQ is this is where boxing IQ comes into place, right? I think Shock's boxing IQ is going to help him far more than Hernandez's strength and power is going to help him in this fight. I don't give a fuck what the ring size is. I think Shock proves, right, why he is who he is in this fight. I do think that he's got some obstacles to overcome if it does go 12 rounds, and if it's remotely close because of where it is, there's a possibility he gets robbed. And horrible. But I think he's a smarter fighter than people give him credit for, because he's not as a big name as other guys. I think he gets in there and he figures it the fuck out. To be honest with you, I'm not worried about it at all. Unless it goes to the cards and we see some shit where it's a thing where he's won clearly 7 or 8 rounds, and it's somebody has it a draw, or they go the other way, and you go, well, what the fuck was that? And we've all seen that too many times to tell. So that's the only thing really that has me kind of concerned.
I think the good news for Shock, though, is that he's like a master of range and distance, and he hits hard enough where when he lands, it's eye-catching. It's not like he's a Paulie Malignaggi smart boxer where he's boxing beautiful, but there's no eye-catching punches. Like, the reason he beat Vargas was because he was landing the more eye-catching, obvious punches. And I think that's part of why I think he'll give Navarrete problems, because I could see a world where he's in range to punch when he wants to be, and then Navarrete, when he lets his hands go, Shock's gone. I think it's a shame that he beats like maybe even like a fringe pound for pound level guy, and then he's the world champion and he has to go to the challenger's hometown. Mm-hmm. That's so backwards to me, man, and it's unfortunate. He's definitely earned like better circumstances than that.
Felix, what's your thoughts on that? Do you have any worry about any of those things, or you think he's just going to be good regardless?
It's. I mean, there's going to be hurdles, of course, to overcome, but I think the end result is, we know where it's going to be. Just how does he answer to those times when it's those speed bumps? You know what I mean? And those are the things that we look for in fighters to see how they get past hard times in their career, and we see how great they truly are. That's why I've always been like critical about Floyd. I mean, he was that good that he didn't really have to get tested, but we never got to see him fully tested, so you couldn't see how he would react in a fight. And that's one thing. Again, like I said, we look for fighters to see how they're going to perform after that.
Well, so, the other thing about Shock when he fought Vargas is he really got tested in that fight.
Yeah, see,
back half, Vargas really stepped up his pace, and Shock was able to stand his ground.
I will say, even for a guy like Floyd, maybe not at the times we would want to see, but I mean, I think we did see him tested. Like, I mean, Shea Mosley cracked him with two big shots. We saw him rock a few times. So I think he did show Castillo. I think we've seen him in some of those fights, and we've seen how he has responded in some of those fights also. Even like Chop, Zab Judah, those guys were able to land big shots on him, and he's able in those fights, even in the first fight, he was able to change it and kind of win decisively still too. And I think for Shock, it's going to be kind of like what you said, Felix. Just the speed bumps. I think that Rocky Hernandez is not going to go out there. His game plan is not to go and just make Shock miss and outbox him for 12 rounds. He's going to have to go in there, slowly apply the pressure going forward, and look for small little moments that he can capitalize on. I think as long as, he will get some shots, and I think Foster will win, but it's not like he's not going to get touched. Every boxer gets punched when they're in the ring. Rocky will land some good shots. I think it just comes down to how Shock responds to those moments. But I think he's at this point cool, calm, collected enough. The Ray Vargas fight was a huge experience for him, so I think he's got enough in there to be able to deal with those moments. But I think those will be the first time Rocky lands a big shot. I think will tell us kind of how the fight goes. If he doesn't capitalize on that momentum right there, I think it could be easy money for Shock.
Yeah, I'm with that too. I agree, and that's why I still think it's going to be Rocky's underrated, especially as a puncher. He's not going to get as much credit as people. Well, people aren't giving him that much credit. So the performance Shock's going to put on, man, against that hard of a puncher too. He's not going to get all his flowers for it. I already know it, but hey, if you're listening, Shaq, I appreciate you, man. It's going to be a great performance, and that's an underrated fighter, man. That's a tough dude, man. I don't even with the scorecard, situation, I don't foresee it being that, once close to where they would even rob, Foster.
I just think Shock does a good job of winning rounds clean. So yeah, I like his chances in this one.
Yep. Even a guy like Rocky, we got to give Shock, which we've given him his flowers anyways, but his first title defense, he is going to enemy territory to fight a 25-year-old prime, a guy who's even in his prime.
Shouldn't be that way.
No, 100% it shouldn't be that way. But I do want to give him the credit because we see a lot of guys when they have the leverage on their side say, oh, this and that, or I don't know if I want to do this, or I don't know if I want to do that. 100%. Should it be this way? Absolutely not, which is why I think Shock deserves even more credit for taking a fight like this, knowing, okay, he's got all the confidence in the world, he's going to beat this guy, but knowing in the back of his mind, okay, some funny stuff could happen here. I'm not the guy that they're backing. I'm the free agent who's coming in. It's in this guy's hometown. They're hyping up this guy, all this talk, this and that. So give him even more credit for that. I do think he wins. I think a win here would set him up for, I'll just go around the table quickly, but the next fight, Eddie Hearn, which also gives me confidence that he might get a fair shake, is that Eddie Hearn is the promoter in this fight. And Eddie Hearn has talked about if Foster does win or whoever wins that fight, he wants to match him up with Joe Cordina. I'll start with you, Nibs, first. Is that a fight because that's a unification fight? That's some of those things we want to see these champs at 130 fight each other. I think that's a great fight. And is that the fight that you would want to see next if Shock does take care of business tomorrow night?
I'm not opposed to it. Shit. You know what I mean? And I think it puts Shock in another position to where, and I think he wins that fight, right? I'd favor him in that fight. Also, he gets another strap. Now you can't ignore him, bro. You know what I mean? He's not just some kid who picked up a belt, and got lucky. Some people are saying that kind of shit. I've seen or heard that before. But then he becomes legit, right? Now you're a unified champ. Get him 2 belts. Then he can kind of start maneuvering and getting those bigger paydays. And I'm here for that, bro. But I wouldn't be against that fight. And I have Shock winning it. Probably 10-2, bro. That's how confident I am in Shock right now. I'm all in on that kid.
I will say I really like Cordina, and I think there's a explosiveness to his game that it might give Shock some problems, but that's one of the more meaningful fights in the division. Navarrete is still the number 1 guy, but I think that the winner of that fight would be the clear number 2 guy. I'm
with you too. The Cordina fight would be a good one. there's a couple other fighters in there that I think would be fun to see him fight with, but I mean, at that weight, and I don't know what's the situation with Hector Garcia's title belt. Does he still have that belt?
He doesn't. He's going to be fighting Lamont Roach coming up, which is another pretty solid fight. I like, especially coming off a knockout loss. That's a good fight. So he will fight Lamont Roach. No official date yet. It's being rumored for one of these last PBC cards, but that should be coming up soon. It's a mandatory fight. TGB won the purse bid, so it should be coming up soon.
Okay, yeah. See, I wouldn't mind seeing seeing Shock against somebody like Oscar Valdez too. I know that's kind of like it's not necessarily a step up as far as like, moving the will forward for like, undisputed and all that, but I mean, that I feel like that's the kind of fighter that he can put on a hell of a performance on if he can pull off a victory. But either way, that's a perfect clash of two as you mentioned earlier, Dakota, you're talking about experts and whatnot. They're both experts in their style, and that's a perfect clash of those right there.
Yeah, 100%. That's a meaningful fight for the division.
Man, I'm talking dirty with that fight, bro. Like that's some exciting shit right there. Let's not skip over that. You know what I'm saying? That Oscar Valdez joint. See, that's what I'm talking about. Like I'm cool with the Cordina fight, but shit like that gets me excited, bro. But Valdez or even Navarrete, bro. Like, man, bro, Shock against either one of them, bro. Look, take all my money for that. I'm here for that.
And I was gonna say, hey, I mean, Shock is a free agent too, so that's what Eddie Hearn. But obviously, Eddie Hearn's gonna say, "Oh, if Shock wins, he's gonna want him to fight on his network." But yeah, now they said I would if you had a choice between Shock fighting Cordina next or Shock going to Top Rank. Let's say a 2-fight deal, and he's gonna fight a Valdez and then a Navarrete, or a Nova and then a Navarrete. Like there are some other big fights out there at 130 that I would love to see. And Top Rank would be. I'm not sure where Shock is looking to go if he's just going on a fight-by-fight basis. But shoot, I mean, Top Rank probably has the most bigger fights for him in that 130 weight class right now.
They do. They would feed him Robson for sure. That would be his first meal.
That's a good fight too, yeah. But they would, the Top Rank special, they would, I'm sure, do that to kind of test him out, see where he's at a bit. But even that's a fight that I'd be interested in. I think Say Styles have become a pretty underrated fighter.
That's a good Styles make fights because Hobson's a really good technical fighter, and I don't think Foster is going to make it a real physical fight, so that would just be a high-level chess match.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. It would be fun, though, for sure.
That's a fact. So we're going to wrap this up in a little bit just because we do want to get to the viewers. I know you guys are interested in the Serrano cards. We don't want to kind of double book that and be on when that's on because we want to see it too. But Nibs, I'll give you the floor for this. Dakota and Felix are lucky. They are here for the first ever edition of Fantasy Fight Friday. It's a new topic we've been having. I'll let you throw it if you want to start out with one fight or just we can do a few afterwards, but I'll give you the floor. What do you think is the first ever official Fantasy Fight Friday fight that we're putting out there and we're going to debate?
Man, so we were talking about this, the last couple of shows, bro. And I kind of want, since it's Fantasy Fight Friday, I want to start with fantasy fighters, right? Guys that aren't real live, boxers, right? So if you are
Dakota's gonna love this.
Y'all are gonna see where he's going with this. So y'all will see where he's going with this.
If you are a fan of boxing, right, a respectable fan of boxing, you've seen Rocky. Everybody's seen Rocky. I mean, if you haven't, please go somewhere else, dig a hole, and crawl into it. But
and watch all the Rocky movies in that hole.
Right. Thank you. So, Rocky's got, there are real life guys where you go, damn, that dude probably followed the Rocky mold. But let's take these two guys, Rocky, and we're talking like Rocky 1 and 2 version Rocky versus Apollo Creed in a mega super fight, right? Because he already fought his daddy. But if the Apollo Creed, and we're talking Apollo Creed from the first movie versus Rocky from the first movie, from the first Rocky movie, versus each other, who wins? And how does it end? Does it end with, does it go 12? Do they, double knock each other out? How many knockdowns are in that fight? You know what I mean? Dakota, what you thinking?
Well, I mean, didn't they fought each other twice?
Right. You mean Adonis Creed or Apollo?
Adonis.
Okay.
Apollo.
Yeah, not Apollo. My fault.
Bro.
Okay.
I said he fought Apollo. I was talking about he
I see.
fought his son. Adonis.
I didn't want to steal his thunder. Okay, yeah, I get it now. Okay, wait. Yep.
I mean,
Adonis Creed and Rocky Balboa. All right, I think
probably
I
have to go Adonis, bro. I probably would. He'd do it close, but I would probably have to go with the new blood.
I would probably go Adonis too, and I think even though he's lighter in weight, he would probably look bigger than Rocky in the ring. From the first two movies, if you go with that version of Rocky.
Yeah,
if you
Rocky
give me-
was still doing hikes in the snow and doing sit-ups in the barn. So
Yeah, if you give
training
me,
was a little less scientific.
you give me Rocky 3 or Rocky 4 version, it might be more 50-50 for me. But Rocky 1 and Rocky 2, I'm going with, the most recent version of Creed that I've seen, at least. Two.
Right, I'm gonna put you on the spot then. Prime for prime. So even just that movie, prime for prime, the best version of Rocky, the best version of Adonis Creed, who you picking? Because I don't want you to kind of say, oh, this one or that one. We want to put you on the spot, an official pick right now. Both prime for prime, who you got?
I'll go with Creed.
I think that's what I would go to. I think, man, it's tough. I think Nibs is upset at us right now. I think a lot of people will be. It's like, man, how do you count out Rocky? But here I am doing it and picking Adonis Creed. I think
Rocky's gonna have his little moment. He's gonna have a flashback of his whole life before his eyes, and then he's gonna drop Creed right at the end, get everybody's respect, and then Creed wins the decision.
Well,
all right.
So wait, hold on.
Yes, look, I feel like it's Bud and Spence all over again. I'm the only guy with some common sense around here. Rocky, god damn it! Okay, prime for primes. Adonis is a beast, and I get that, right? But I'm here to tell you, bro. Look, Rocky is who Creed was. You know what I'm saying? Like, come on, bro. Nah, man. Bro, look, look. I know, it would be he beat his daddy once. You know what I'm saying? But I just, when you look at Rocky just doesn't give up, bro. I think Adonis would give up. He was a little bitch in the first fight. I'm sorry. You know what I mean? Like he was a little soft, bro. He was in his feelings. Yeah, he came, he got his shit together, but I don't know. Rocky was always that, fuck you, dude. Like,
yeah. There's one X factor that I want to just get off first. So, is Apollo Creed alive, and is he helping in the corner of his son? I think that's a big X factor. Because,
I was going to ask that same question.
They had two fights. It was 1-1. The rumor was in the Creed fights that they had a third fight behind closed doors that Apollo won. So my thinking is, if he's there helping out in the corner, I think he might have the game plan. He's already been in the ring and done those things. I think he could help his son get it done. His son, who seems to be in movies, are done better now, but his shots are crisper. They come off a little better. And I'm not going to doubt Rocky. I wonder if Dakota stole my if he was looking at my notes or something, because I was going to say that it's a fight Adonis wins. Rocky kind of has his moments, but at the end of the day, the younger guy, I think Creed gets it done. But I think an interesting X factor is Apollo in the corner. So Nibs, is he in the corner? What's up with that?
So if Adonis gets Apollo, then you got to give Rocky Mick, right? Mm-hmm. And then you got and then you got to sit Adrian's ass in ringside, because if Adrian is ringside, bro, it's a wrap.
Yeah. This is how we got some whack matchups coming this week. we gotta do 70s movie matchup.
Now, when you hear what I did with the real fighters, right? It's a little bit more respectable for conversation. But this was just for fun, right? Like,
it's fun. Yeah.
We gotta have some fun.
I like it.
I think I will say this though: if you give Adonis Apollo, and what's the dude from the first one, the Apollo's trainer? What's his name? I can't remember. Yeah. You know who I'm talking about?
Big Duke.
Duke. Yeah. If you give it, man, then that's I don't know. But if you give Rocky Mick and you got Adrian sitting ringside, bro, you might fuck around and end up with a double knockout. You know what I'm saying? That just.
I don't know. The best version of Rocky had Apollo in the corner. to me, and Tony.
Facts.
That's what I'm saying. He's got the game. Paul's got the game plan. He's got his son in the ring. So I didn't give my official pick, but I think it would be Adonis Creed by decision. I think you'd see some politics involved. Rocky might get one of those wacky scorecards. It might be 8-4 Creed, and then like a 9-3 Rocky card. Mix it in there with the politics, but I do think Adonis Creed gets it done.
Yeah,
There we go.
All right,
Creed wins.
You guys threw me with the Apollo in the corner right thing. I was like, okay, wait a minute. That does change.
That was the
does
first
change.
thing I thought about. Mm-hmm. He's
All
got
right,
the playbook.
Adonis Creed versus Mason the Line Dixon.
Oh man, I would love that one.
Tough call.
That one would be fun. Yeah, without a broken hand, Mason he's a problem. That would be fun as hell.
Shit, fuck around and get Drago back up in this motherfucker and see what's going on. But then we had a real fighters fight, right? And this was one I think, to be honest with you, isn't as easy to pick as some people might think. It's the Tysons. Mike Tyson versus Tyson Fury. Prime for prime. Who would you have win in that fight?
Tyson Fury, sadly. I'm ashamed that I even said that, so I'm getting out of here now too.
But why though? Like just don't say, why do you think Tyson Fury beats Mike Tyson?
Tyson Fury has shown he can take the punishment. I don't think Mike Tyson hits harder than Deontay Wilder with a single punch. I think his power is shocking and explosive, but I think his power is more over time as opposed to Deontay is concerned. And I don't think he'd be able to land cleanly on Tyson's chin. And Tyson's size and skills is just going to be too much for Tyson Fury's, that is. His size and skill is like, it's just his size alone. He's going to just bully Mike around, unfortunately. And, it's not a hard fight for him, sadly. I don't think.
Now, if Mike Tyson had Cus D'Amato in his corner, does that change anything for you?
Maybe smaller Mike, and then so if you give us those versions, I
think for any of these, it's got to be the prime of both guys. So the best, the peak of Mike Tyson, whichever you want to say, just for the Douglas fights, before any of the drama, this and that, the prime of him, just the prime of both guys, I think will always be just the essence of this kind of debate too. It's interesting, Mike Tyson could be in battles. People remember him for his knockouts, of course, but he's had some tough 12-round, 10-round fights. If he was in his prime, what's the prime Tyson Fury? Because even in his best performance, he still got rocked and dropped. You know what I mean? I would say for that, I think that, which we won't see this Fury again, because I don't think he can get up the same way. But I think the Tyson Fury we saw in that second Wilder fight is unlike any Tyson Fury we've seen. He was big, but he didn't have any, he was cut up. I mean, he wasn't cut up with the six pack, but he didn't have any extra weight on him. And I just think that even the third Fury that we saw against Wilder wasn't the same guy. I don't think we ever will, because he said how he went through hell and back in that camp, and I think that is by far the best version that we'll probably ever see of Tyson Fury. And that's the one fight where he just kind of steamrolled Deontay, and there was never any kind of hiccups in that fight either. Yeah,
if you give us that Tyson Fury and the best Mike Tyson, I still think the best Tyson Fury wins. Unfortunately, I still hate saying that.
Yeah. Okay, I get you. Dakota, man, what's your thoughts?
I gotta go Tyson Fury, bro. I mean, he's just nearly a foot taller. I think he has got a different level of boxing IQ. As much as I love Mike Tyson, when he fought other elite guys of his era, he generally didn't win. And I think that Fury has always shown that if he's anything, he's a winner. So I think that Tyson Fury would have won that fight relatively easily.
Jack.
Bro, I don't even want to utter these words right now. I really don't. But, bro, I mean, man, I hate to say it. You got to go Tyson. I think you got to go Tyson Fury. I think when you look at, he's 11 inches taller, 14 inches longer on the reach. And Mike was always excellent at closing it and getting inside the reach. But I think it would be so hard. The Lennox Lewis that we saw Tyson fight, that's not even the Mike Tyson we're talking about. But I think the attributes Lennox had, I think would have always given Mike problems. And I think Tyson Fury has some of those similar attributes. I do think we see Tyson Fury hit the canvas at some point in the fight. I do think when Tyson kind of leaps in with those hooks, I do think he catches him and puts him down at some point. But we've seen Fury has the recuperative powers of almost nobody else in the sport. The Wilder knockdowns he's gotten back from, even if the counts were a little long, he still got up from them. So I got to say Fury by unanimous decision. I think there's a knockdown or two maybe mixed in there, but I just think that he's too big, unfortunately, and really stress the unfortunate part of that.
Wow. All right. So again, I guess I'm the only person rocking with Mike. So and I'm going with Mike Tyson, the model version of Mike Tyson. And the reason I say that is when you look at Mike Tyson early on in his career, everybody he fought was bigger than him, right? Like, now you don't get before Rob and Mike, yeah. You don't get as big as Tyson Fury is back then, but everybody he fought was bigger than him, right? And he was chopping down trees. People forget he didn't start with headshots. It was the body shots that killed you, right? Because Micah hit you twice in that body, and the first thing you doing is this. Oh shit! And then he takes your chin off, right? And he was a lot harder to hit when Cuss and them were still in his corner.
Had that.
Tony Atlas was in his corner, right?
Yeah.
Like it is. I don't give a fuck how big you were, how strong you were, how great your jab was. You weren't really getting clean shots on Mike Tyson back then, right? And I look at guys that have given Tyson Fury the most problems. They're not guys his size. They're usually the smaller guys, right? I think that's what makes the Usyk fight so interesting. You look at Steve Cunningham, who's not anywhere near a natural heavyweight. He had Tyson Fury in some trouble. You know what I mean? As a cruiserweight level kind of guy, he had Tyson in some real trouble. I think a prime custom model Mike Tyson, like you said, pre-Robin, only in America, before all that shit happened. You know what I mean? I think Mike Tyson would be able to get Tyson Fury out of there. Now you take Buster Douglas version, Mike. Well, yeah, no, it's easy pickings. But I think in his prime with the right people in his corner, living right and all that shit. Hey, bro, Iron Mike was a motherfucking beast.
And going to your point, I think we can do that with both guys. If you get the best version of Mike Tyson versus the Tyson Fury that fought Otto Wallin or after his long laugh or those kind of things, I think Tyson will win that fight. Just like if we see the Tyson Fury from the second Wilder fight versus the Mike Tyson in the 90s and 2000s, I think Fury wins that fight easily too. So I think that the best version of both guys. It is interesting, even as I'm thinking more about it, is that something Tyson does is he likes to kind of lean on his opponents and he likes to kind of just zap their energy, which is part of the reason I think he beats Usyk and even probably gets Usyk out of there late. Just the ability to kind of what he did with Wilder, lean on him and do all those things. Tyson, it would be a bit harder to do that because he is much bigger than him, but he'd be so much bigger that trying to lean on him might even walk him into the uppercuts or those things of Mike Tyson. So I think it is an interesting style debate where some of Fury's strengths I think he would have to use his length more than he does against some of these other guys, because against the Wilder, it's not like he's sticking his jab behind him and using his length all the time. He's getting in the inside. He's kind of really roughing him up. Even with Usyk, I think he's going to rough him up in the inside, and that might be harder to do against a Tyson, as I said, who's moving his head, who's going down to the body and then ripping that uppercut upstairs too. But I still got to go Tyson Fury.
I mean, I'll say this, and I'm not, I'm die-hard Tyson fan to the core, so it hurts my soul to even think of to hear you guys say these things. But I will say though that you are right. That version of Fury in the second Wilder fight, I really don't know if you can beat that version of Fury, bro. So to me, that would probably be the only version I would say could beat the version of Mike Tyson I'm offering up. That would, like, if you gave me that version of Fury, I'd be like, well, shit, it's gonna be a good ass fight, but I don't know, bro. I'd probably have to lean Fury too on that one, but that to me, I think that would be the only version because of what I saw, of Mike before he became the superstar, before he even won the belts. You know what I mean? I think he'd won it.
Being brings up a good point too. You can even say take them when they both won their first world title. I think that's a fair thing if we were going to do that across the board. It might get harder just because some guys won world titles before they got into their prime, so it'd be hard to kind of gauge. I think depending on the fighter, that could change, but I think that could be a fair thing. You could say like the Tyson Fury who beat Klitschko versus like just so you could do that version of it too, which I'd still probably pick Tyson Fury in that, but that's a different version. And I think the Tyson Fury that fought Deontay Wilder the second time, I think is head and shoulders the best version of Tyson Fury that we've ever seen.
So how about this? Similar styles and maybe a little bit body wise, right?
Mm-hmm.
You take Tyson Fury versus Muhammad Ali, bro.
Save that for another Friday. I gotta go do it. I'm about to go do stuff that Keyshawn Davis does. I'm out, y'all.
Yeah. The good thing is ITR will not suspend Felix. We don't have to put off any shows or anything like that.
You have to suspend so.
Yeah,
but, a lot of Davis like activities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I want to appreciate you, Weedy Gonzalez. Just wanted to drop by to show y'all some love. We appreciate it, Weedy. I hope you guys liked the first kind of edition of the Fantasy Fight Friday. Got a little crazy on the first one, but me and Nibs felt like that would be a cool kind of introduction to it, and we had some good dialogue with that. And we'll have to think about. We got some good ideas chefing up for that. We got some really good fantasy fights between the men and also the women's side, like we mentioned, throwing out there the Layla Ali's, the Ann Wolfs, getting them in the mix. I think we could have some really, really good fantasy matchups. So,
yeah, next week we got both of the fantasy fights are real fighters, and we're one male, one female.
You want to tip the cap, or should we just say they got to tune in next Friday to find out? You don't want to give it all to them, right?
Yes, I'll give you that much, and I'll say this: both the male and females are a current fighter versus a legacy fighter. Mm-hmm. So, I'll give you that, but you got to tune in for the names.
Yeah. And like Nib said, too, when we do this, we're not going to just say, oh, this person wins. We're going to try to really break it down stylistically as if it's going to be a real fight. Why we think this person is going to win, how we think they're going to win, which version of each fighter are we going to get. As we get into some of these fighters, it might be a debate also of, okay, I thought for this verse, let's say about a Floyd Mayweather, for example. Some people might pick the Floyd that fought Corrales. Some people might say, even though it was at 54, maybe the Floyd that fought Canelo, he was a smarter Floyd. He didn't take as many chances. So I think the debate in itself could even be which version of these fighters we get. And I think that will be an interesting part of it also. So we got Weedy saying what bothers him.
I think that makes a huge difference, right? Because
which version that you get.
And I know it's a complete fantasy fight, but when you guys all said, hey, is Apollo in Adonis's corner, it gave me pause. I said, well, shit, hold on. That's a different conversation, right? Because even if you give me Mickey and Adrian in the ringside, bro, I'm like, well, shit, that'd be a hard combination to beat. You know what I mean? Like if we were doing, so it does change the conversation. Even, like I said, when we're talking about Tyson Fury and Mike Tyson, it's like, well, hey, which version of these fighters are we offering up? You know what I mean? Because it is a different fight. Like the Mike Tyson we saw, like you said, versus Lennox Lewis, completely different guy than the guy who won his first title, right? They're almost different, completely different fighters. So it's, and then you take Tyson Fury today versus the Tyson Fury, who fought Klitschko. They're different guys. So yeah, I mean, and Tyson Fury was going through some shit apparently, before that. So, does that weigh into it? So those are definitely things we have to take into consideration.
That's a fact. A lot of different variables. For some of these other fighters, it could be which trainer, if they've had multiple trainers. A lot of those things will go into it. But salute to you, Backyard Prophet, for tuning in. We appreciate you. And then last thing before we wrap it up, just Weedy Gonzalez mentioning about the Keyshawn Davis thing that we saw. He at first the news was just that he was being suspended and it was being ruled a no contest. We didn't know why. Now we do know why. My thoughts on it are, I mean, clearly it's not a performance-enhancing drug. I guess the rules are the rules, and you should know if you're going to fight in a state that's going to test, I guess you should probably know ahead of time and just be careful of those kind of things. But at the end of the day, I think that this day and age is something that we should be able to move past. And it's an interesting point, which I was going to bring up that Weedy did, is that how does Keyshawn Davis, each commission is different, but Keyshawn Davis has gotten a suspension before Alicia Baumgartner has. Someone we're fans of, don't get me wrong, but we just got to keep it real. She popped for something that was a real performance-enhancing thing. We've seen Conor Benn, a lot of these other fighters do it. It's funny to me that Keyshawn Davis gets a penalty, boom, just like that when these other guys don't. So what are you guys just thoughts on just this whole news and just the kind of just, not the hypocrisy, but I guess the difference between these commissions about what they penalize fighters for and what they kind of just pretend like they don't even see?
I mean, it's bullshit. And I think, people, all of these fighters should take pause when they see that a fight's going to be in Texas, because you get the shittiest scorecards in America. and you get things like this where you got a little weed in your system and they can take that win away from you. And you know, if I was a fighter, I would never fight in fucking Texas.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the Baumgartner thing and the Keyshawn Davis thing are night and day, apples and oranges, right? Like you said, you got a performance enhancing drug. I've never, in my entire 42 years, seen weed enhance anyone's performance in anything but eating corn dogs. So, you know, I'll say this, bro, but I will say this. Having said that, if you are a professional athlete, I don't mean boxing, NFL, anything, right? And you're performing in a state or an arena and they tell you you can't smoke weed, don't.
Problem is, though, Nibs, is it stays in your system for 30 days. So if he, you know.
That's the thing as a professional athlete, right? Keyshawn Davis didn't know 30 days before he had this fight. He knew before that, right? So my thing is this: if you're, I don't give, you know, maybe college kids or, you know, amateurs, right? I give them that kind of skate. When you become a professional athlete, this is your money. This is your livelihood. You are the one responsible for any and everything that goes into your body. It's just like when Canelo was out there eating the tainted meat. You live in Mexico, bro. You know that they put fucking steroids in the goddamn meat. You know what I mean? It's, as much as I want to give you a pass, look, guess what? If you know you're going to be boxing in Texas, right? And you smoke weed, either don't take the fight, ask to have the venue changed, right? Maybe have it pushed back, fake an injury. I don't give a fuck. Have it pushed out a couple of extra months. You know what I'm saying? So that weed leaves your system. But you are now responsible for what is in your body. So if you know you've been juicing, you know you've been smoking, you know you've been, you know, sniffing up the white lady. I don't give a fuck what you're doing. But it is up to you as a professional athlete to be responsible for that. Now, again, with that being said, I think it's absolutely fucking ridiculous that they're suspending him and taking a dub for weed. Like, I mean, come on, bro.
Yeah,
but
that's what
the Baumgartner thing, she should have that. She should have. I do agree. The definitely should have that changed.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I stand on it, where I agree 100% that it's something we should kind of be past, and they shouldn't be penalized for it, especially taking a win away. And now he loses his fight date. He was supposed to fight Jose Pedraza on Heisman night. He now can't take that fight. He now has to wait till next year. I do also agree with what you're saying, is that if any of us were in this situation and anybody who knows, okay, you can't do this 30 days out, you should. It's easy to say because it is still something that we shouldn't be dealing with. It is bullshit, all those kind of things. But as you said, he still knew that he knew a few months out in advance that he was going to be fighting in Texas. And whether it's right or wrong or just complete bullshit, I think it's something that he knew ahead of time. And it's something that I think I guess maybe should have thought about. Whether he thought about it, had a slip, didn't even think for a second, I'm not sure. But at the end of the day, he deserves his win without a doubt. But I do see the point you're saying about just knowing that in advance where you're going to be going and fighting. Look,
I'm going to tell you right now, if I'm a professional boxer and they tell me I can't have bacon and big booty white women before my fight, I'm losing that fight. I'm going to tell you right now. I'm not giving either one of those motherfuckers up. But it would be on me if I don't know if you could ever test for that, but you know, if they tested me for bacon and big booty white women, I'm going positive. God damn it, it's the way it works. But who would be to blame for that? It wouldn't be the place I'm fighting. It wouldn't be my opponent. It wouldn't be commissions, because their rules are their rules. It would be me, because I knew in advance and I did it anyway, right? It is what it is, bro. And as ridiculous as this fucking rule is, it's still their rule. You know what I mean? It's just like, all right, well, fuck it. If I'm fighting in Texas, or I even think in a couple other states, you know, it's still like that, right? Weed is still on the ban list. So if you're going to fight, and not just in Texas, but any place where weed is banned or on the list,
Saudi Arabia,
right? Yeah, well, there's you know, that's a whole different conversation, you know. But if it's on the list of things you can't have, don't fucking have it. I mean, it sucks. It's stupid. But you know, I digress.
Even Wheaties coming here was one of the things that I had said. Just Actually, just in Texas, you can carry an AK-47, but they don't let you carry a couple of grams. Or even famous comedian Ralph Barboza had said before that in California they like you being able to smoke, and in Texas they want you to be able to smoke other people. Just a funny kind of thing that he made a play on that as a comedian before, but it just speaks to, I think, as you said, all places have different rules. Whether or not we agree with those rules, it's something that sucks. But if you're a professional athlete, you do have to abide by it. And unfortunately, he is being suspended. But I do wonder that we've seen, as I think Backyard Prophet said it, or Weedy said it, some of these other sports have changed those things. You do hope that Texas or some of these other states look at that and maybe do kind of change some of those things and realize, okay, it's not helping his performance at all. As you're saying, Dakota, I think they're stuck in their ways. I don't think they will. But it's just crazy. We're sitting here with a fighter like this who's being suspended, and we have fighters who are popping for whether it's diuretics who would help cutting with weight, things that help building muscle, stamina, all those things, and they're not being.
Texas Texas will allow actual PEDs before they allow weed. That's how backwards shit is down there.
Yeah, no, can't disagree.
Now, give me right if I'm wrong, right? Texas doesn't give a shit if you have a card. Am I right on that? Or is it you like if you have a medical excuse? Like I know
I don't think
there are no weed under any circumstances kind of place.
Wow. Because I remember Lamont Peterson, he had like a legit issue with his testosterone, and he had to get a medical reason to have like his testosterone replaced or some shit like that, and he got banned for a couple of fights because of that. And he had a legit reason. I mean, look, the Nate Diaz thing, that shit, yeah. I mean, look, bro. But you see it in other sports too. I mean, how many NFL players are not even in the league anymore because they chose to smoke weed? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It's fucked up because it robs Keyshawn of a great performance, right? Like, that was a great performance. You know what I mean? We learned a lot from him in that fight, and now it doesn't even fucking count. So.
Yep, that's a fact. So before we wrap this up, I'll let Dakota, because I know that there's a local fight around my area in New England. It's Reyes boxing promotion. I know Gabe Morales, who's fighting on that card. Tomorrow, somebody who you've done commentary with, who you've done interviews with. So Nibs is going to give his whole spiel on supporting local boxing in a second, but kind of give just the listeners something just about Gabe Morales, about that card, and what Mike Reyes has been doing. Just an example of some local boxing that's been doing good things.
Listen, man. And we're close to getting into this main event here, so I want to pop off soon. But shout out to Gabe Morales for getting the main event. He's been moving along slow, but he started boxing really late. So it's cool to see the trajectory he's took, going from being like a mid undercard guy to being a main event in a high level club show. Reyes Boxing doing high level club shows. And I'm hyped for Gabe, man. And I think that he's one of those guys. He gets a little better every fight. He takes one little step forward every fight. And hopefully, he's able to shine on this card. And I think before it's all said and done, Gabe Morales is going to be a guy that winds up on TV.
Without a doubt. So as he said, we're approaching the main event that we all want to see between Serrano and Ramos. But I mean, Nibs, it's not an episode of Catch and Counter without you putting the fans on to some local game. So let's hear it real quick before we finish this thing up.
Look, bro, just really quickly, because we are in a crunch, I want everybody to think about the kid that isn't boxing, the kid that hasn't even picked up the sport yet. Support your local events, because there's going to be a kid out there who sees that and goes, wait a minute, I can do that. You know what I mean? We all know guys that are in the sport that have become champions or elite level fighters, or even just really great journeymen who've had careers that they can provide for their families because of these local events where they went to as a fan, saw the support and love that their local community came up with, and joined the sport, and again became fighters that could provide for themselves and their families, and maybe even got themselves out of a situation, right? There's a million stories in the sport of boxing just like that. And that's why I keep telling people, support your local events. Yes, of course, buying pay-per-views and all that is great. But if you support your local events, you're not just helping your local economy and the fighters in the ring, but it's the guys people that are coming there that might eventually get into the sport. It's more than just what you see on TV. So
and by the way, Nibs, just to add to what you're saying, all the guys you see on TV were at that level at some point.
Exactly.
And that's the level they really need your support.
right, all the guys we mentioned, all the Tyson Furies, all the Deontay Wilders, all the hell, even the fantasy fights, the Rockies, the Apollo Creed. Guess what? They had to start. If you watch those movies, where are all their first fights? Fucking club level, fights, and these are Hollywood guys. So even the fake fighters had to start there, right? And they needed that support. And if they didn't get it, none of those Hollywood stories happen, and none of the real life Hollywood stories happen without your local support.
Yep, couldn't have said it any better. We've all supported local shows. I've seen 3 of absolute classic club fights this year. We're going to have awards for these fights, but I saw a welterweight fight between Brandon Higgins and Kenny Larson, which is a fantastic, just a war of a fight. I saw Mike O'Han against Harry Gigliotti, an absolute classic of a fight. I saw Julian Baptiste against Jamar Jones, a middleweight unification fight in Massachusetts, classic of a fight. So you will see absolute classic fights. Me and Dakota went to a show in Lowell earlier this year, and Nibs and Felix go to these shows in Arizona. And one thing I can say is I've never been to – sometimes we watch these pay-per-views and we say, oh, this might not have been worth the money, this and that. I've never been to a club boxing show and I've said that wasn't worth my money. It's always been worth my money and then some, and I can't stress enough just the support for these guys because
really
they need
quickly,
it.
and because I know we're trying to get out of here, right? So people understand we put our money where our mouth is. Me and Jack's first interview was with James Toney. So after he got inducted into the Hall of Fame, we could have just stayed at that level of the fighter, like, hey, we're just gonna fuck with guys here. But you see on ITR as a whole, right? That was an ITR event. It wasn't just a catch and counter event. But you look at catch and counter as a whole, we continuously get these guys before they become big stars, or even if they don't become big stars, we support them there as well. So we're putting our money where our mouth is. We go to these local shows. We bring these fighters onto our platform because that's where the money really is. That's where the sport really is. It's the guys that you don't know. And, I don't want to get choked up, but that's where the sport, like, really, man, like, that's where the sport really matters, is the guys that you don't even know are going into the sport. They need that support, man.
No, that's a fact. And I'm working even on some guests. We're going to have some professional guys, some amateur guys from the New England area. So it'll be cool to kind of bring those guys on because, as Dakota said, a lot of these guys you will see on TV eventually. And instead of that being the first time you guys see these people, it'll be great to kind of then see these guys learn their stories before. So once they're on TV, you can kind of get the whole thing. We got Backyard Prophet shouting out Deborah Grant from North Carolina, best women's amateur prospect, Carolina Horsemen, stand up. Backyard Prophet too. So on ITR, on Instagram, kind of DM us if you wanted some information on her. We can kind of start working with getting her stuff out there also. We're here to support any amateur, any professional fighters that you guys are around, anything like that. So ITR Boxing on Instagram, shoot us a DM or whatever, because we'd love to kind of give her some shine also, without a doubt, because we appreciate you. You always tune in, so we'd like to pay it forward with you on that also.
All right, fellas, I got a dip.
Yes, sir. I'll see you. And then last thing Weedy is saying is he wants to see Amanda Serrano's Jordan. So I do have it right here. She's wearing some ones. We got a picture with Layla Ali and Holly Holm. Let me see if I could show it on here so you guys can see it. It's not gonna. I don't think it's gonna work. You can't really see, but it's hard to tell with the glare. But she's wearing ones. They're white and pink. It'll be pretty cool. So tune on over to the Zone. That is where you guys will be able to catch us. Or you'll be able to catch us next week. We will be catching that event pretty soon as it starts. So Nibs, episode 11 in the books. I know you were working through some things. It was great to have you back on here, and we will catch everybody next Friday.
I'm about to go down a bottle of Pepto, bro. All right, man.
All right, we'll see you. Salute to Backyard Prophet, Weedy, and everybody else in the chat, and we will catch y'all next Friday.